This is Chrysalis. I'm Chris Corson. This is my studio in the community center in Old Greenbelt, Maryland. I'm an artist in residence here, and I teach sculpture in the ceramics program. I want to thank the Workhouse Art Center for including Chrysalis in the 10th Annual Clay International Juried Exhibition. This is one of my favorite pieces, and I am glad that jurors Lynette Hesser and Steve Lux liked it too. As you see, it is a figure bent over on itself, legs crossed, arms crossed. He's holding his knees, head is down, eyes are closed. From the front, it's enclosed and very self-protective. But if you turn the back is totally exposed and vulnerable. I think that that's really an aspect of the human condition. We think that we can protect ourselves from the world, but we're always exposed to it anyway. I find strength in that, strength in vulnerability. That at least is what Chrysalis evokes in me. You may have a completely different reaction, which is entirely valid, of course. Let me first put this piece in the context of the rest of my work. When I shape wet clay into human form, I have two articles of faith. The first is that the body is not a bystander as life is shaping our personality and character. The same processes shape our tissues, imprinting our physical selves with the same messages. So I believe that the body always expresses who we are, what we have gone through, and even what we may become. For me, sculpting the human form cannot be separate from exploring the human condition and my place in it. Second, I believe that everyone, deep inside, shares the full emotional range of the human condition. We only admit to everyday consciousness a small portion of that range, which becomes personal identity. But underneath our individuality, there is always the common pool. I think this seeming paradox is the source of empathy and relationship. When I am making my figures, I want to be reaching down the root to this common pool, so my figures can partake of both the personal and the universal. So I need for the postures and gestures of my figures to come from deep within myself. I explore different poses by getting into them until one feels right to my inner senses of body and feeling. I try to keep my mind as little involved as I can manage. I think my truth comes from a deeper place, and I want my hands to capture it for my figures. I said earlier how I feel about Chrysalis. I didn't know all that when I put myself into this pose. I felt the enclosure, I felt the self-protection, and maybe I needed those feelings that day. But what convinced me to make a figure in this pose is that it felt significant. It touched something deep within myself. The hand building took over a month with a lot of technical issues to solve in achieving a form this complex. The technical aspects kept my mind occupied while I separately kept open the deep channel to the significant place so that the emotional content could flow up and out my hands and into the clay. And I think it worked. Chrysalis does partake of personal and universal. You may have a different reaction from your own growth and experience. But if you find resonance within yourself, then we have connected at the deep level and shared something of being human. Sculptors have done that for millennia. The last thing I want to talk about is where the colors and sheens on my figures come from. After the initial firing in an electric kiln, bisque firing, which turns my clay pink, I fire them a second time, buried in sawdust in a trench in the ground. Burning clay in a pit firing, is one of the oldest methods of firing clay, going back at least 20,000 years. In my pit, the sawdust takes about 3 days to smolder down around the figures, giving their skins rich, earthy tones of creams, grays, browns, and blacks. I can't control how the figures will emerge from the pit, but time after time the process gives me surfaces that look like they come from deep within the figures themselves, adding depth and dimension to the emotional content that I put into the forms. So, thank you for watching. If you would like to know more about my work, or me, or the Workhouse Arts Center exhibition, here it is.